I'm super happy that you guys are here because the more information that I can share with you, the better off you guys are going to be. So I have my presentation here, and I'm going to skip several slides just because I have Explore information in here also. And if you guys are not doing Explore, then we don't need to talk about that, except for um, just the kind of feeder pattern if you guys wanted to do it in your younger grades. So can you guys see my presentation? Maybe it's presenting in here.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So this is us at Worlds last year. My robotics team and I. It is definitely one of my proudest accomplishments because I had kids kindergarten through senior year doing robotics in rural East Texas, and I feel like that was an awesome thing. So this year's season challenge is called First in Show in General. Oh, I went to the wrong side. Um, our first Lego League is the Masterpiece season, and then the first Tech Challenge is Center Stage, and then the first Robotics Challenge is called Crescendo. And so there's, that's the whole spectrum of the first Lego League. Um, just very briefly, so that you guys know the difference between First in Texas. First is the global organization that stands for inspiration and recognition of science and technology, and it's global. So when you go into the First dashboard, which hopefully you guys have seen that and are familiar with that, that's where you put in your coach's information, that's where you put your team information, that's where you are linked to do the youth protection policy. All of those things are a part of First as a global organization. And so, I always thought it was a little bit silly since we are teachers and we've had background checks and we've had our fingerprints and all that kind of stuff. It's still important to make sure that you guys keep your dashboard up to date and make sure that both of the coaches, you won't be able to register for events. I'll get a kickback error that both coaches haven't had their youth protection plan completed if you guys haven't done that. So I just want to make sure that I say that. Then one source of confusion is that First in Texas, which is the nonprofit organization that runs the events in Texas, is like a sister organization to the First Global organization. So when you register for events, and when we have conversations like this and kickoff events and things like that, that is through First in Texas. And so sometimes that gets a little bit confusing because you don't have to register with First in Texas. But when it comes to going to competitions and things like that, that's where I come in and I help facilitate that kind of thing. I talked a little bit about this in terms of the grade spans for each of the different divisions. So the first Lego League Discover, this is on the next slide. First Lego League Discover can be as young as pre-K. I've never done it with pre-K, but you could theoretically do it with pre-K all the way up through kinder, and then Explore is for first, second, and third grade, and then Challenge is fourth through eighth grade. And the rules in the United States is that when you become 16, then you've aged out of First Lego League Challenge. But then around the world, you can be 16. So, just when you go to competitions or if you guys go to the World Festival and you're like, man, that's a really big eighth grader. That eighth grader has a whole lot of facial hair. It's a little bit different around the world. So I'm going to skip these first Explore things. And I'm going to start talking about specifically challenge. So if you hear First Lego League Challenge or if you see First Lego League C, that's what that means. I know that can be confusing if you don't know what all of the acronyms mean. So if you're not brand new, then you've probably seen this before. If you are totally brand new, this will be kind of helpful and informational for you. But if you look at this diagram that's on the left, there are 4 parts to the competition. And I think that a lot of times we spend a lot of our time and energy with the robot game because a robot game is like the fun physical thing that we see. But there are 4 parts and they're weighted equally. So the robot design, I'll show you guys the rubrics for the different parts of the competition too. But the robot design, so having your students be cognitive and aware of how they design their robot to complete different missions. Maybe they have some kind of attachments so that their robot can be manipulated in home base. Um, Part of the robot design is also the program design. So if the students can explain, how they designed this program, like we tried it going, with 100% power, but we found that it wasn't reliably hitting the target. So we backed it down to 80% and we had better reliability. That kind of explaining of how you designed it and what the thought process was is what the robot design is all about. The innovation project has to do with a challenge each year, and the innovation project takes kind of the scope of what the robot games are all about, but it gives students an opportunity to be creative and to have some of those research skills and some of those presentation skills practiced as a part of the innovation project. One thing that just popped in my head I want to make sure that I say before I keep going is when you're thinking about the different parts of the competition, we want to make sure that all of the teammates are involved in all of the parts of the competition. So we don't want to separate out, okay, you're going to be the robot game, you're going to be the innovation project, you're going to be the designer. All kids are really supposed to be working collaboratively in all of the different parts. So I just want to make sure I say that. That's not to say that, like on my teams, I gave the kids like the options of roles for each team, and then they decided amongst themselves who was going to be in that role. So I had, like the role of a team captain. I had the role of an innovation project captain. I had the role of a timekeeper and a role of a logistics person. So if you were the person that was in charge of logistics, you were the person that told us 10 minutes before the practice was over so that I had a historian who could write down what the team worked on that day, so that a lot of in my early years, a lot of time what we did was spent trying to figure out what the team had done the last meeting. And so when I had that historian, I could say, like Alex and Leo worked on the music, sounds, lights, and stage missions, and they were almost finished, but they needed to make whatever adjustment the next time. Also, in y'all's packets that came with the registration are engineering notebooks, and that's a great way to kind of use that engineering notebook to keep track of the work that's done each time. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the innovation project in just a moment. So the last of the 4 components is the core values. And I'm going to go to, well, I'm going to skip forward 2 slides because the core values are listed out here. So the core values is who we are as an organization. So our teamwork, we're working together as a team. Inclusion, making sure that we embrace and celebrate each other's differences and strengths. The impact is how we apply what we've learned in the course of the season to actually make a difference in our world. Of course, fun is always really, really important. If you're not having fun, then your students are probably not having fun, and then we're doing something wrong. Discovery is what new ideas and skills we learn and explore. And then innovation is using that creativity and persistence to solve real world problems. So there are 2 phrases that are used often. One of them is gracious professionalism. Hold on, I'm going to try to say it again. Gracious professionalism. This is making sure that we're being kind and respectful all of the time, and also making sure that when there is a disagreement or a conversation that needs to be had, whether it's with a judge or a ref or whatever, it's the students that are doing it. And we've coached our students to be professional, to be assertive, but not to be rude or disrespectful, because that's not how we solve problems. The other word is cooperation. And the way that I coached my students is that cooperation is that you are in competition with yourself and always to be improving. So when you go to a competition, you're not necessarily going to be trying to take down a team necessarily, but you're going to be trying to do the best that you've ever done. So just keeping that in mind. Um, the core values, in the past, there was a judging session for core values. This year, the judging sessions are virtual, and we'll talk about that in just a second. But there's not necessarily a core values presentation like there is a robot design presentation, and the innovation project presentation. Um, but the judges will ask them questions like, how did your team solve problems when you had a disagreement? Who made the decision to make the team name? How did you guys decide what topic your presentation was? That kind of thing, to try to assess how the team worked together collaboratively. So then on the actual day of the qualifier, when we do the robot games, the referees also score core values. And so they're watching how the teams interact with each other, if they're being helpful to other teams that may have questions, that kind of thing. So does anybody have any questions about the 4 parts? So the biggest thing from the facilitator standpoint is making sure that the students are doing the work. A lot of times the kids will get frustrated, we'll get frustrated as coaches, and we want to be there to really provide motivation and snacks. That's really what my role was with my teams. They're going to need some help, but really, if we're looking around at a competition and it's the coaches that are touching the computers and the coaches that are touching the robots, well, then that's not the kids doing the work. So just keep that in mind. Also, I'm going to share this presentation with you guys, and this presentation is also in the Padlet that I'm about to show you. So, all right, trucking right along. I'm going to show you the team meeting guide and the robot game rule book, but it's also on the Padlet, which is a huge source of information. But there's also lots of information on firstlegoleague.org. The kits that you guys are probably using are Spike Prime kits, not to be confused with Spike Essential kits. They're not the same thing. And I've accidentally ordered the wrong kits. But there's lots and lots of resources on Lego education for you to get started. There's also lesson plans if you wanted to use this in your class. The Spike Prime kits are what replaced EV3 kits. So if you've done coaching in the past, the EV3 kits, you can still buy them secondhand, but you can't still buy them from Lego Education. So, okay, so I'm going to show you guys the Padlet, and I want to make sure that I'm sharing the correct screen. All right, are you guys seeing my First Lego League Padlet with a red background? Yeah, we can see it. Okay. There's lots of different information in here, but if you were talking about robot games, for example, there's this video, it's from YouTube, that talks about all of the different robot games. The challenge overview that I was talking about with the 4 different parts of the competition and the core values, that's linked here. As are the judging rubrics. As a coach, one of the most helpful things that I did as a coach was to kind of dissect the rubrics with my students, because then you know what the judges are actually looking for. So for example, this is the core values rubric, this is the innovation project rubric, this is the robot design rubric, and in the judging sessions, the students are going to be presenting their robot design and their innovation project, and the judges are going to be providing feedback. And if you noticed, this exceeds category in 4. If you earn a 4, then the judge goes in and they have to give evidence of how you guys earned a 4. So just think, keep that in mind. They give you a lot of detailed feedback, which I think is very helpful. One thing that I want to make sure that I point out is on the innovation project, it's not only about clearly identifying the project and coming up with a design that solves the project. It's also about communicating the idea and sharing it with audiences that it would benefit, that it would have an impact on. So when you're thinking about your um, innovation project, you're not done per se if you haven't shared it with somebody that it would benefit. So the whole engineering design process is what we're trying to have our students become familiar with. So we're sharing our idea, we're doing different iterations of our idea based on the feedback that we get. If the fact that, Mr. Cuevas is a fine arts teacher, he might be a great person to give a practice presentation to, and then he could give you feedback based on the fact that this year is all about fine arts. And if he says, hey, that's a really cool solution. For example, I saw a team that had a paintbrush that never dried, so you didn't have to clean it in between the two. And the students were asked, well, how does it work? And they couldn't really tell me how it works. Well, then some feedback that might be like, how can we make this actually work, kind of thing. So keep that in mind. Does anybody have any questions about the rubrics or where to find them?
So you're saying we could incorporate interviews or practice presentations to get so the kids can clarify their project, their presentation.
Absolutely.
So if they're so they're wanting to create something which they cannot explain on how to create it. So one of my kids wanted to create an artificial hand that could help kids sketch. If he cannot describe how to create the hand, which is something we could not actually create, then it's not a doable project.
Not necessarily. So in this situation, like, you might not be able to explain the mechanics of how the hand works, but if you could talk about, like, we researched hands and we found out that your hand has, I'm making up a number, let's say 500 different 500 different muscles, and the knuckles work a lot like a ball and socket joint, which they don't. And you could show, like, our robot has a similar joint to this, and that it moves, only in one direction or something like that, where you're talking about some of the science, but you're not necessarily making a functioning prototype. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because there's no way we can, but
no.
Okay.
It doesn't have to be something that they can manufacture. Your prototype may look like a hand, and they may say, our project in real life would have this and it would work this way, but not necessarily be able to make it. Does that make sense?
So they actually have to build a prototype as well.
I would encourage,
not just draw it.
Well, I would encourage building a prototype. It's not necessary. That's not like one of the criteria for the judging. But it does help work through some of those problems that you might not know if you hadn't tried it. You know what I mean? So I had students who their project last year was super powered, and so they made lightning in a bottle because they decided that one of the problems that a firefighter would have if they were firefighting in like a forest fire would be that they would have to carry extra batteries to keep all of their electronics running, and that would be a very difficult thing. So they decided that they found on the internet a way to cause a chemical reaction between like a granite or a graphite rod and salt water or something like that. And they were able to actually charge their robot using the lightning in the bottle. That was super cool. But when it came to, soldering the pieces together, those were things that they had to learn how to do. And it would have been completely okay if they had the idea and they showed the prototype and it didn't actually function. It'd be better if it did, but these are, elementary school, middle school aged kids, so it's okay if it doesn't function. Any other questions? Okay, so the rubrics are also on the firstinspires.org website. Oops, I closed the tab. So that's available for you, and they're also on the first Central Texas region Padlet. So let me get back to sharing the right screen. Can you guys? I'm not sharing the right screen anymore. Let me get back. Okay, you guys can see it now. Go back to the Padlet. Okay. The other thing that's helpful in this resources right here is the judging flow chart. So you can see this is how the sessions will go. The judging is done virtually the week before the actual qualifier. Okay, and this is something that's new for the whole Central Texas region. In the East region, this is how we did it in the past year. And so this is, even if you're not new, this is something that's new and different. In the Event Hub, which is a website that is like the background work to all of the judging and event stuff, I will add y'all's teams. Several weeks before, we'll ask what time judges are available to meet, and then we'll send out the times that are available to the teams. They'll be after school someday, Monday through Thursday, based on y'all's team's availability and the judges' availability to do virtual judging. It's done via Teams and it's done through the Event Hub. So the judges will join through the Event Hub and the teams will join through the Event Hub. And then they will be going through this judging flow chart. So the teams will introduce themselves. They have about 5 minutes to give their innovation project presentation. Then there's time for the judges to ask questions about the project. Then they have about 5 minutes to explain their robot and program design. And then there's time for the judges to ask questions. Then they talk about core values. Those are questions that the judges are going to be asking. And then there's time for the judges to give live feedback. Okay. And then there's a little bit of time afterwards for the judges to fill out their rubrics online.
What was this page called again?
The judging flow chart. Where did it go? Where did it go? Okay.
Where was it again? I'm sorry. Where was
It's
that
in the
found?
Padlet. It's in the Padlet.
Okay.
Let me get back to the Padlet. This is what happens when you have too many tabs open in your brain also. So let me go back. So you guys see the red Padlet right now, right? Okay, so this is under the masterpiece resources. This first column is, if you have parents that need help getting into the first dashboard, that's there. How to register their kids is here. If you have people that are interested in being a volunteer, signing up for volunteer management through the VMS is here. If you have a team that has a coach that has retired from that position and you need to change the coaches in the dashboard, that's here. And as my second iteration of saying this, it's really important that your dashboard is accurate, because when we pull, for example, email lists, we're pulling from the dashboard. So it's important that the coach number one especially is accurate and up to date. The Event Hub automatically sends the invitation to lead coach number one. So if you are lead coach number one for multiple teams and you have a co-coach, you'll have to share that information with them so that they're able to access it also. The next resource that I want to show you guys is the team meeting guide. So are you able to see the team meeting guide on your screen now? or is it still the Padlet?
It's a team meeting guide.
Okay. This is really a step-by-step what to do with each time that you have together. There are ways to modify it down. So, for example, if you don't have, 12 sessions left, then there are some places that you might shorten, but this is really intended as a checklist. So, like, did you introduce the challenge? Did you go through the different activities? Did you talk about what the museum curator does? Did you have time for kids to share it at the end of your project, at the end of your session? And so it's got different questions. It's got things to do, like do this with your students. Make sure that you, as the coach, have looked at the video ahead of time and you know what they're supposed to be doing. This is really, if you are brand new and you're starting out and you're not sure what to do, this step by step, session by session team meeting guide is really a wonderful resource. So I wanted to make sure that you guys knew you had access to that. There's a copy of the engineering notebook here also. So I think that they send you 6. If you wanted every kid on your team to have one, you could print extra engineering notebooks. And the activities in the engineering notebooks mirror what's happening in the team meeting guide. So the students have their own kind of workbook to go along with. Another really, really helpful resource is this multimedia resource. And so if you look in here, if you have, let's say, I'm going to use your example of the hand. If you have an idea about, let's say, using your hand, make a prosthetic hand to do sketching, there are book resources in here. There's website resources in here. Team management, robot design. This Mr. Hino's Lego Robotics channel is my favorite YouTube channel that I watch often. I feel like Mr. Hino, he's got the EV3. He also has the Spike Prime, and the different ideas that he has and the way that's my favorite YouTube channel. There are also just different designs that are on here that might be helpful for your kids to look at. Maybe you just look at it so that you have information and verbiage for them to explain their design. And then there's also, you know, video resources for the innovation project, web resources that are in here, talking about interviewing skills. If you wanted to interview an expert, what kinds of questions you might want to ask them. If you have a project that's more based around a museum or an exhibit, there are some resources here. There are music resources if your project is based around music or theater, or movies. So just there's lots and lots of things in here. If you wanted some tips for innovation project from judges, this might be a place to look. All kinds of stuff. This is all in, this is called the multimedia resources, and this is linked in the Padlet, and it's also on the First Inspires website. Okay. Let's see. The first.
Ms. Navarro, can we have you mute real quick, because I think there's some clicking sounds coming in.
Okay.
Okay.
They're switching to the robot game. The robot game rule book. The last page of the robot game rule book is my favorite cheat sheet. Let's see if it'll load. Of all of the different missions and how many points they're worth. One of the things that you can talk about with your students is being strategic about which missions you're trying to accomplish, because they're not all worth the same amount of points and they're not all the same amount of difficulty. And so part of your strategy can be, oh, well, we're doing all of the missions that require pushing or pulling because that's what our robot is the best at. And so, your students explaining how you chose which missions to do, and which order you do the missions and why, that's an important part of that robot and program design. I like this as a cheat sheet because I'm like, all right, cool. My kids have accomplished the light show. Now, what's another thing that we have? We have 30 minutes. What could we do next? And it also says exactly, you know, where the different parts need to be at. And one thing that's important that your students know is that it's scored at the end of the match. So if your robot accomplishes something, but it gets negated because it runs over it or something, I'm thinking about like the audience members. You put an audience member in one place, but your robot comes back through, and when it drives past, it knocks it out of its spot. Then at the end of the match, that audience member isn't there anymore, and so therefore it doesn't count towards your points. There's also this map that's in here that I think is really cool, because you can show the path and plan out the path that your robot might take. And this is another thing that you can use in your presentation with the judges, talking about strategy. This also shows how each mission should start and how each mission should finish for different amounts of points, and how things should be set up. So this is just a good, like, I use this page all the time, like bag number 3 is the immersive experience, and it's mission model 3. They're not all exactly like that. But then you can also click on the hyperlinks that are in this digital version, and it will, take you to where the information is in there. There's also some code that's in here for the guided mission if you guys are interested in using this code that's in there. There's also troubleshooting tips, and this, it used to be ev3lessons.com. Now they have primelessons.org, but they're the same organization. There's some really great how to get started, how, step 1, get your robot moving. Step 2, do this. Step 15, develop a line following direction. That kind of thing is here. This is Central Texas region, important documents, and this presentation is down here in the kickoff presentation. And then the last thing that you guys might find very, very helpful is this coaches training series. They're PDFs, but if you look into these training series, they have lots and lots of helpful information in here about, how to lead your team. Why would you sign up to do this kinds of things? Where should you start? I think that was somebody's question. How do we get started? What's the difference between this, that, and the other thing? That kind of information. So that is all on the Padlet. I'm going to put the link in the chat right now so you guys can have it. I see you, Miss Navarro. What kinds of questions do you guys have?
What page was the tips page on?
The tips for how to start a team?
No, on for innovation projects.
The multimedia resource is the one. I'm not sure if it's exactly what you're talking about, but this multimedia resources underneath masterpiece resources. That's the one where it has like tips from the judges. Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Anybody else? What other questions do you guys have?
Okay, I did have a question about the virtual judging that's going to take place.
Okay.
So for us, for Monday is a holiday.
Okay. That's good to know. I hadn't previously considered that because it's in January is Martin Luther King Day.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
So, so our virtual judging will probably be Tuesday through Friday, correct?
So I need to think about it and see kind of how the chips fall. I like to leave Friday in case there's some kind of technical issue and the judges didn't show up or the team didn't show up or something, if we have to have like a built-in buffer time. But with 24 teams and one of the days being a holiday, perhaps we won't have that luxury.
Okay.
But I'm glad that you pointed that out because that's definitely something to think about.
Okay.
is that the other question that is most common asked about virtual judging is how students should do it. You know, we're in Microsoft Teams right now, and I'm able to share my screen and share my presentation. That is something that students can definitely do. It's pretty cool because they can actually share their code. They can show, you know, show the screen that shows the code so they can talk through it. In the past, students often did trifold boards for their innovation projects, and now more teams are leaning more towards like Google Slides or PowerPoint, or also Canva. If you guys haven't heard of Canva, it's a free resource to make all different kinds of presentations. It's pretty cool. But the students, when they're practicing their presentation, should practice presenting, you know, even if you as the coach went into another room so that they could practice, you know, making the microphone work and things like that, so that they're not nervous about it on the day of the event. During the actual judging, the coaches are allowed to be in the room, but we ask that the coaches stand behind the team, because if they're behind the computer, then they could be giving prompts or whispering things to them and stuff like that. So you're allowed to be in the room. You know, you're their comfort and you're their stability. If they get stuck with the technology, we don't want them to totally panic and, you know, lose their mojo and flow. So you can be there behind them, but we ask that the coaches don't say anything or don't give any prompting or anything like that. So, okay, what other questions do you guys have? Did I talk enough about the robot games? Do you feel good about that? Okay. One thing that I don't know if I mentioned or not, but there are robot updates. So, you know, every 2 weeks there'll be a referee meeting that is at the national level, and they'll decide to clarify a rule. This year, there are some missions that your robot can almost manipulate from not even leaving home. And so there have been some clarifications about that. There have been some clarifications about mission number 4, which is the masterpiece mission. Sometimes that is a little bit confusing, but basically what you do with that mission is you build something to represent your innovation project, and then you put it at a specific place on the board. So that's a pretty easy mission. So don't miss that opportunity. But there's also been some clarification because I can't remember exactly what the rule says, but it has to be easily detached, so 1 click or less. But as the season goes on, some of the rules need to be clarified and specified. And so I want to make sure that you guys know to check for the robot updates as well. Okay, I'm going to go back to my presentation and make sure that I said all of the things that I want you to hear. One other common question that I get is help with coding, and I would say YouTube is your friend. YouTube is your student's friend. I hate learning things by YouTube, but I think kids these days know how to manipulate it a little bit better. They like it. So
I have a question on
go ahead.
this project. How closely do you tie it to the arts? If it's just a hobby that you're just exploring, how do you tie that into the arts?
So can you give me an example? What did you kids choose? Do you know?
I couldn't hear you.
What topic did your students choose?
I'm just talking in general.
Oh, okay.
One of the coaches asked me about well, because it talked about exploring hobbies. So then how do you bring that into the arts? Like if it's specific to maybe a stage or maybe is it theater? How do you tie that in?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go back and share the team meeting guide. Let's see if I can get this to work. if you, let me go back up to the top. If you look at the team meeting guide, the session where you're introducing the actual challenge, it kind of leads you through the thinking. And when I read it and I processed it that way, it made a lot more sense. As you go throughout the season, you look at different, there are experts that are on the mission model, like the stage managers, but then there are also like there's different avenues, I'll say, like whether or not you're doing a museum or you're doing the stage manager or things like that. It's not necessary that you have to follow or choose one of those. I'm looking for where it actually asks you to choose. Okay, hold on. Because I want to read the exact words that it says.
If I may, Alex,
Mm-hmm.
the fine arts thing is a challenging part for us. So when the kids chose a hand and they couldn't come up with how to use art, anything in fine arts to enhance, by meeting number 2, they said, okay, we're going to choose, because their second option was gaming.
Okay.
So if they do video games, then they said, okay, well, we can use the arts easily in video gaming because we can enhance it by sound, virtual something. And then the kid with the hand said, and I can incorporate the hand for video gaming. They're in love with that hand. So I just want to make sure that I'm not missing, because I think that's been the hardest thing for me is the fine arts. Do we use the fine arts to present, or and like you said earlier, no, use arts to make it more accessible?
Right. So this is the overview document that you guys are seeing right now, and I've scrolled down to the innovation project. So the whole overall guiding question is, how can you use technology and the arts to help others engage or increase participation in what you love to do? So if you love video gaming, then you can use technology to help increase participation or to engage other people. You can also use the arts. In the example of the hand, well, if we're talking about using a prosthetic hand to give somebody the ability to draw because they may not have a hand, then that's using technology to increase participation in something that people love to do. Does that kind of clarify your question or give you any ideas? I'm looking for, I think it was Leo that asked the question.
Okay, so I think I see the vision now. It's just that I think I was thinking video gaming, but if you include people of all ages, then definitely you can use some technology and arts,
right,
to make it more accessible.
So I was thinking, like, just me as an individual, I was thinking of, my dad is somebody that I'm caring for right now. My dad has, I'm just going to say, let's just say he's having trouble seeing. Okay. So I could use technology and the arts to help him be able to, let's say, I don't know, see his computer screen better by
Mm-hmm.
by putting some kind of magnifier on specific areas. So if what I love to do is play around on my computer and one of the barriers is I'm not able to see it as well, then how can I use technology and the arts to remove that barrier to participation?
Mm-hmm. Okay, wonderful.
Leo, was it you that? Oh, hold on just a second. I want to make sure that was it Leo that asked the question. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yeah. So that was, yeah. So when I heard the question, it was also, I was, I guess, a little taken aback because I wasn't sure how you would do that. But I guess you're using both at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And like I said before, the research question and the innovation question is intentionally left broad, to try not to exclude any ideas that kids may have. So if it's not expressly written rule against it, then you're probably okay. Okay, Miss Navarro, what other questions do you have?
My last question, coding.
Okay.
Um,
The best coding resource is it's linked in the dashboard. It is whether you have Spike Prime or Lego EV3, it's that robot resource that is the ev3lessons.com or primelessons.org.
okay, is it against the rules to bring in someone to help with coding?
Absolutely not. And you should definitely make sure that you thank them and use them as a resource in the future. One resource that helped my students a lot were older students that maybe have graduated from the first Lego League and are, you probably have a computer science class at a high school nearby you. And remember that it doesn't have to be in person. They don't have to come to you. You can use Google Meets or Teams or things like that. And they can share screens and they can and help out that way too. So
Wonderful, wonderful. Okay.
good questions. I'm trying to think of any pro tips that I wish somebody had told me my first year. I think my biggest pro tip is, well, okay, two things. One, if you want to get a really good idea of the innovation project and how other teams do it, you can always volunteer as a judge for a qualifier that's not your own. And you can see what other kids are doing. That when I was a judge, that helped me improve as a coach also because I could kind of see what was going on. The other thing is when you go to the qualifiers, definitely encourage your students to talk to other teams, watch other teams, see how they may have had a different solution to a similar problem. You know, the population of people that does robotics is often a very shy population of people. And so a lot of times kids get nervous about talking to strangers, but we're all, at the qualifier, everybody is there because they love robots and they want to be able to do new and cool things. So definitely encourage your teams to talk to other teams. And the other thing is that when you are a brand new coach, don't worry about perfection. Don't worry about, when we talk about cooperation, you're competing with yourself for an improvement each time. So, when you go to the robot games, kids definitely watch the adults. They watch how the adults respond to things. They watch how their parents respond to things. So if you're like, man, that was so close, you almost earned those last 2 points. Oh, sorry about my dog alarm. You almost earned those last 2 points. I can't wait to see what we're going to do next time. Don't show the students that they are they've disappointed you in some way. Does that make sense? Because that's definitely not the point. And remember, if you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong. Very cool. My email address is alex.cabley@firstintexas.org. So if you have a question, feel free to email me. I appreciate y'all. I'm excited to see what San Antonio has bringing to the table. You too, Mr.
Thank you.
Valdez.
Thank you for your time.
Absolutely.